How's it going, everyone? About a year ago, I put together a video talking about things you should know if you're getting into USPSA. And the problem is, at that point in time, I myself was still only just getting into USPSA. So I gave some information that I have updated my beliefs on since then and wanted to throw together a video which is a little bit shorter. So first of all, I have to say that if you're interested in getting into USPSA, absolutely do it. Yes, ammo is expensive right now when I'm recording this, but even with that being said, it is the most fun per dollar that you can have with guns, period. I've shot machine guns, belt-fed even, and even that is not as much fun as USPSA, even though it is more expensive. So first of all, USPSA, despite being obviously people running around with loaded guns, it is a extremely safe sport. That's because we take safety very seriously. So I'm going to start off with safety. So we're going to start off with the 4 basic rules of gun safety you should already be familiar with. Rule number 1 is treat every gun as if it's loaded. So what that means is I'm not going to do anything with my gun, even if I'm sure it's unloaded, that I wouldn't do if I knew it was loaded. Really, that just is reinforcing the importance of all the other rules. Rule number 2 is never let the muzzle cover anything you don't wish to destroy. So what that means is when the gun's out of the holster, I'm not going to point it towards anybody else. I'm not going to break the 180, which I'll talk about in a second. And I'm not going to sweep my own hands when I'm reholstering. I'm not going to sweep my feet when I'm running. I'm going to always keep it pointed downrange. Rule number 3 is keep your finger off the trigger until your sights are on the target and you've made the decision to fire. What that means is basically, especially there are some common places people break it, which is when reholstering, when unholstering, when reloading. But basically, unless you're actively shooting at a target, your finger should not be on the trigger. It should be outside the trigger guard. Rule number 4 is know your target and what's beyond it. What that means is make sure there's nothing that you don't mean to shoot on the range when you are about to start shooting. Make sure everyone else is behind you and you're not about to start with someone else downrange pasting. So those are the 4 basic rules of gun safety that hopefully you should already be familiar with. Beyond that, there's a couple USPSA specific rules that are based in those, but I'll go over them. The first one that you're going to hear about the most is the 180. So what that means is whenever you're shooting, the berm is 0 degrees. So if I'm aiming straight down range, that's 0 degrees. Then I have 180 degrees where I'm allowed to shoot. Ideally, courses should be set up so that you don't have to shoot that way, but if I needed to, if I overrun something slightly, I can point all the way to here. But the moment I point beyond it, I am breaking the 180, which means I should technically be disqualified because of a safety violation. Like I said, course design should be set up so that you're never going to point anywhere near it, but basically a lot of people will, the most common way that people will break the 180 is when they're reloading. I'm right-handed, so if I am going for a reload, I'm naturally going to point the gun like this. And so if I was moving to my left, that would be breaking the 180 because I'd be pointing this way. Someone left-handed would be doing the opposite. They would be pointing the gun like this if they are moving to the right. So basically when you're planning out your stage, if you can, try to plan your reload so that you'll be moving towards your handedness. So if I'm right-handed, I'm going to be moving to the right. If I'm left-handed, I would be moving to the left for my reload. But you can still do it without that. You just have to be very mindful of the 180 and try to keep your shoulders squared up against the berm whenever you're inserting the magazine. One other way that people will sometimes break the 180 is if they overrun a target. So let's say there's a target here and I forget about it, and then as I'm going by it, I remember, and when they come back, rather than just coming back, they shift their muzzle back. That's going to be a 180 violation. Another USPSA safety rule that people will often get themselves in trouble for is it's rule number 3, but keeping their finger off the trigger until their sights are on the target. A lot of times people will keep their finger right in the trigger guard when they're doing a reload or when they're moving around when they should not have their finger in the trigger guard. Make sure you take your finger out of the trigger guard because we will notice, and that's a disqualification. We don't want to be rude about it, but it is a safety rule. And the last safety rule that I can think of that is a common pitfall for beginners is sweeping yourself. So for example, when people are going to reholster, sometimes they mean to keep their shirt out of the holster so that they can reholster safely, but they reach into the holster, and in doing so, they're going to sweep their hand every single time. Make sure that you do not sweep yourself either when doing that or when moving is another one. If someone's moving, they can often point the gun right at their hand, their offhand. The last safety rule I can think of to be mindful of whenever you're at a USPSA event is dropping your gun. Ideally, you should not drop your gun, but if in the unlikely event that you were to drop your gun, just let it fall. Don't try and grab it out of midair. If you lose grip and your gun starts to fall, that gun is all trigger now. Do not try to grab it, because you may send a shot somewhere where you really don't want it going. So that's all the scary safety stuff out of the way. I know it seems like a bit of a lot, but the reason USPSA is quite literally safer than bowling is because we take safety extremely seriously. It seems like a lot, but it's only because we don't want anyone going home with any more holes than they showed up at the range with. Moving beyond that, there's some basic gear requirements before you start going to USPSA events. The first thing, even if you're just going to watch, even if you don't want to shoot, you're going to need eye protection and ear protection. For ear protection, you can either use over ears or in-ear ear protection. Look for something with a good decibel rating, because there's going to be some loud guns there. Eye protection, you can use pretty much anything as long as it's good for keeping debris out of your eyes. So don't show up with like shutter shades, but realistically any set of eyeglasses will work. The number 2 requirement, once you decide you're going to start shooting, you're going to need a gun of some sort. Most of the time that's going to be a pistol, but you can also use any pistol caliber carbine as long as it actually has a stock. So you can't show up with like a brace pistol if you decided you're going to get clever and avoid ATF rules. Even though I know they suck, we're still not allowed to do that, just because that's always tenuous. So eye pro, ear pro, gun. Depending on what gun you use, if you use a pistol, you're going to need a holster for it to go in whenever you're not actively in the process of shooting. And regardless of whether you show up with a PCC or a pistol, you're going to need a case for it. The PCC is going to spend most of its time in the case, and your gun's going to basically, your handgun is just going to basically be in the case until you go to a safe table. I'll go over that in a second here. Moving beyond that, PCC doesn't really need a belt. You could technically just run your mags out of pockets if you will, but for handguns you're definitely going to need a belt, holster, mag pouches, and magazines. Whatever you show up with, you're going to need enough magazines and mag pouches to get you through a 32 round course of fire comfortably. What I mean by that is, don't just bring exactly enough ammo to get through 32 rounds, because then if you need to make up shots or something, you're gonna run out of ammo. So generally speaking, I run 3 mag pouches. You can technically do it with 2, is pretty much fine. Realistically, you only need 1, but if you drop that mag, or if you have a malfunction, or if you just really suck at shooting steel plates, it helps to have extra ammo. It's always better to have more ammo than you need than not enough. So real quick checklist: you need eye protection, ear protection, you need a gun. If you're running a handgun, you need a holster, you need a belt, you need mag pouches, and you need enough ammo carrying capabilities to get you through a large course of fire. Ideally, have about 50 rounds on you. Whenever you show up at the range at your first USPSA event, ideally your gun should be unloaded and in its case. If you show up with your gun that you're concealing, you can technically do that, but make sure that you go to someone who is a range official, so that they can get you unloaded and cleared immediately, and then you're good. But ideally, show up with your gun in its case, unloaded, and go to a safe table. This is my stand-in safe table for today. So let me show you what the process is. With a handgun, you're going to go to your safe table. You're going to have your belt on already. You're going to take your gun out of the case. At your safe table, it's a good idea to make sure your dot is on. If you use a dot, decock the gun. The gun has to be decocked whenever it's in the holster, and then put it in the holster, and you're good to go. Take your case with you, put it back in your range bag. There can be no handling of any live ammunition at a safe table, so really this is all you should do at a safe table. Yes, you can technically practice draws and dry fire, and you can practice reloads with empty magazines, but realistically you should just be doing all that stuff at home. Don't do it at the safe table, because other people probably want to get to the safe table and uncase their own guns. So once you do that, step away from the safe table and go about your business, get onto your squad, and get ready to shoot. But while we're on that topic, before you go to your first USPSA event, there are some basic skills that you should practice just so that you're competent and safe, and you're not trying to figure out how to shoot your gun while you're also trying to compete with it, because you just get embarrassed then. You don't have to be super skilled, but you should have some basic fundamentals down so that you have a good time, really. So the first basic obvious skill is you should know how your gun works. You should know all the controls on your gun. So you should know how to manipulate the slide, how to drop magazines. You should, if you run a dot, you should know how to turn the dot on. Really just basic stuff like that will really go a long way at your first event. You should have at least some basic marksmanship skills. You don't have to be super fast, you don't have to be super accurate, but you should at least be able to get rounds to go sort of where you want them to, because targets can be somewhat far away and you want to at least get a decent amount of hits rather than misses. I'd recommend practicing your reloads, because the majority of stages you're going to need to reload, and when you're practicing your reloads, practice them on the move rather than just standing still, because ideally, unless you're at a one position stage, you should try to do your reloads on the move. I'll talk about that more when I get to stage planning. Finally, there are some range commands that you should practice going through without any ammunition, but you should make sure that you know how to load your gun and how to unload your gun and decock it. Finally, even though we like to pretend that our guns are 100% as reliable as a hammer, you should practice, or at least know how you would go about clearing a malfunction if you were to have one, because matches seem to bring out the malfunctions. My PCC, for example, I never had a malfunction until I went to a match, and my Glock only ever seems to malfunction when I'm at a match. The next thing you're going to want to know when you get, at least find out whenever you get to your match, is what division you're going to be shooting. There are a bunch of different divisions. There's only a couple that I would really recommend you shoot at your first ever match, but I'll go over them. So here's all the divisions. There's production, which production is basically very minimally modified handguns. You can't do a whole lot, you can't do anything too crazy, but you could do a little bit of modification, and you can also only fill the magazines up to 10 rounds. That means you're going to be doing a lot of reloading, and for that reason, I don't really recommend production to most new shooters. The next division, and the division that I compete in, and my favorite division, is carry optics. Carry optics, you can do all the same modifications to the gun, except you can also put a red dot on it, obviously, and you can run your magazines, which can be up to 140 millimeters. You can load them up to capacity, so that's usually about between 20 and 23, 24 rounds sometimes in your magazine, which means you can get through a lot of courses of fire without technically needing a reload. Moving beyond that, there is limited division. In limited division, you can do just about everything to your gun, except you can't run a compensator and you can't do a red dot on the gun. But aside from that, you can do just about everything else you'd want to do in limited division. Moving up from limited division, there's open division. In open division, you can do just about everything to your gun that you would ever want to do, to the point where it gets a little bit ridiculous. 99% of the people watching this video probably don't have an open division gun, so I would recommend staying away from it for competitive reasons. But if you show up with a gun which is technically not legal for any other division, or if you just want to run really, really big magazines, or a big magwell that you can't run in carry optics, for example, you could absolutely shoot open and you'll have just as good a time as you would anywhere else, but you won't appear as high in your scoreboard, at least not for quite a while. Finally, if you're just not a very good handgun shooter and you prefer rifles, you can shoot PCC. There's a lot of people who disparage PCC because yes, it is bringing a rifle to a handgun competition, but you can absolutely shoot PCC if you're just not very confident with handguns. And in my opinion, it's a good way to learn the game, so that then you can come back whenever you decide you want to really get good with handguns, and you won't be trying to learn how to shoot handguns at the same time as you're learning to shoot the game. Realistically, those are the only divisions that I would actively recommend to you if you're just getting into USPSA, but there are technically some other divisions. There's a home for just about anyone who wants to shoot USPSA. If the only handgun you have, or the handgun that you like shooting the most, is a 1911, you can shoot in single stack class. Single stack is definitely difficult because you can only really have 10 rounds on the gun if you're shooting minor power factor, or 8 if you're shooting major power factor. So you're going to be doing a lot of reloading, but if you love your 1911, you can shoot single stack division. If you're a true masochist, or your favorite character from Lethal Weapon is Murtaugh, or your favorite video game is Red Dead Redemption 2, You could shoot revolver division. Revolver, again, you're going to be doing a lot of reloading, and those reloads are going to be probably the most difficult reloads that you can do in USPSA. But if you decide you want to, you could shoot revolver. And finally, there's also limited 10. Limited 10 is basically just limited division with only 10 rounds in the magazine. So those are all the divisions that there are. Realistically, I would tend to recommend away from the lower capacity divisions. I would recommend you shoot high capacity divisions as long as you don't live in the United Soviet Socialist People's Banana Republic of New Yorkistan. But as long as you live in a free state where you're allowed to load your magazines up to capacity, by all means, it's one less thing for you to be thinking about whenever you're just getting into this game. So I would tend to recommend away from those divisions. As I'm releasing this video, just 2 days ago, USPSA released their updated rule changes for 2021, and they made things a lot simpler, and they made a lot of the divisions more equal than they used to be. For example, you used to only be able to run a light in open division, but now you can run that in any division, which is nice, especially for people running super lightweight Glocks. We can add a little bit more weight to our guns. Basically, what that means is you used to be restricted to open division with your light, but now you can run it in any division if you want to. Another thing that we recently just did in USPSA is we allowed you to mount your magazines and your holster anywhere you want to. So if you, for example, if you shoot appendix, I can't for some reason, but if you shoot appendix, you can run straight up your appendix rig in a match. You probably won't be super competitive because I can't get it to work, but if you want to shoot your appendix rig, you can absolutely shoot your appendix rig in whatever division your gun would actually be competitive. And you can also mount your magazines wherever you want. You can even use magnets to mount your magazines if you want to in any division. Whereas you used to have to mount them behind your hips, which was a real pain for certain people. So that is the divisions. When you start off, you're going to be unclassified. Eventually, once you start shooting USPSA, you can get a classification. What that means is usually once or twice per match, there's going to be a classifier stage. And what that is it's a stage which is replicated down to the inch all throughout the country at various clubs. And the fastest and best shooters who shoot that classifier, their score is 100%. And based on how you shoot it, you can get another percentage, and that's going to make you either a D, C, B, A master or a grandmaster as you progress through the sport. And it's sort of a yardstick to measure how good of a shooter you are. And as you get classified, you can use it to kind of guesstimate who you should squad with whenever you go to a match, because if you're a D class shooter, shooting with like master class shooters is just going to get kind of frustrating after a while. Whereas if you're an A class or a B class shooter, shooting with a D class shooter, you're not really going to learn anything from them. So I'd recommend trying to shoot with people who are in about your same class or slightly over or slightly lower if you're trying to either learn from someone or mentor someone once you get into the sport. So that's a lot of the kind of boring clerical stuff. So now we're going to go to things that you need to know when you're at your first match. First of all, it's helpful to know how the scoring in USPSA works. I went through my first 2 matches without even really understanding how the scoring works. So here's how it works. On the targets, there's going to be a couple different scoring zones. The very outside of the target is the D zone. Moving in is the C zone, and the very center of the target in the A box of the head is the A zone, which I just called it. So that's Alpha, Charlie, and Delta. Depending on what kind of gun you're shooting, you're going to get different scores for where you hit. Regardless of what you're shooting, you're going to get 5 points if you hit an Alpha hit. And if you hit a Charlie, if you're shooting, so here's what power factor is. Power factor, if you're shooting realistically, if you're shooting 9mm, you're going to be shooting minor power factor. If you're shooting 40 cal, you're going to be shooting major power factor. It's just their kind of way of sort of balancing out the fact that if you're shooting a major power factor gun, you're probably dealing with more recoil and lower capacity in most classes, at least, or most divisions. So if you're shooting major power factor, if you hit the Charlie zone, you're gonna get 4 points, and if you hit the Delta zone, you're gonna get 2 points. But if you're shooting minor power factor, the Charlie is worth 3 points and the Delta is only worth 1 point, which will really start to hurt your score. But like I said, basically all it boils down to is if you're shooting 9mm, you're shooting minor power factor. If you're shooting 40 cal or 45, if you're shooting 1911, you're going to be shooting major power factor. So with that, also any steal on the stage is going to be worth 5 points, as scored as an alpha hit. And those are all the points that you can earn. You can also earn penalties by either missing a target entirely. So if you're supposed to shoot it twice and you only hit it once, that's going to be a miss. A miss is minus 10 points. If there's any hostage targets, or no-shoots as we call them, a no-shoot is worth minus 10 points. And there are a bunch of different penalties that you can get if you step out of bounds and fire a shot, or if you forget to reload on a stage that mandates a reload. That's going to be minus 10 points, or sometimes minus 5 points, depending on the penalty specifically. So you add up all of your points and you subtract any penalties you get, and that's going to get your score. Your hit factor is your score divided by the amount of time it takes you to shoot that stage. So if, for example, if there's a stage with only one target, and you draw and you put 2 shots into it, and you get 2 A-zone hits, and it takes you 2 seconds to do that, that would be 10 points divided by 2 equals a hit factor of 5. And then as it goes on and on, more targets equals more potential for points, but you're also going to probably be running around. So depending on the stage, you're going to either have to prioritize accuracy or you're going to have to prioritize speed. Generally speaking though, I find that you're probably faster and more accurate than you think you are. Whenever you go to your first couple events, you're going to be slow, and that's okay. It's better for you to be slow than for you to do something unsafe. But as you get into the sport more and more, I would urge you to try shooting faster than you think you're capable of shooting, because I struggled as a middling C and then B class shooter for quite a while. And then at one match, I thought I was doing good, but then I started hearing the scores and the times, and I was like, wow, I'm really going way too slow. And then there was this stage where the targets were somewhat close, and I decided, you know what, I'm just gonna throw the shots as fast as some of the faster guys are throwing them. And that stage and the next stage were my best stages I had shot up to that point. So what I'm trying to tell you is, you really should try, once you are comfortable with it, you should try just going bang bang as fast as you can fire the trigger, because you can probably actually get some pretty good hits then. And even if your hits aren't quite as good, you'll be going fast enough that any Charlies or even a Delta or 2 is going to be made up for by how much faster you're going. Basically, if you go to a range and you put the target out to only about 5, 6, or 7 yards, which is realistically where a lot of the shots are in USPSA, if you just draw and you aim in the A zone and you go bang bang, I bet you both of those shots are going to land in the A zone, or at least Alpha Charlie. And once you're confident enough that you're not going to be unsafe doing it, I would really recommend you try doing that at matches, because you're going to start picking up a lot more time, which even if you're not as accurate, it's going to be more fun. But once you start picking that up, you're going to get more proficient at it, and your accuracy is going to improve. And then it's going to be kind of a butterfly. Improve my speed, my accuracy is suffering, improve my accuracy, my speed suffering, and you're going to slowly work up like climbing a ladder, and they're going to both get better at the same time. So that's how the game is played. That's how the scoring works. Just a couple of other basic tips before you actually start running through a stage. First of all, you're going to get to walk the stage before you shoot it. So you're going to get your course plan, your stage plan. I would recommend, especially when you're a new shooter, make sure that your squad knows that you're a new shooter, and ask them if they can recommend or show you how that you would shoot the stage. Realistically, the people who shoot USPSA, I mean, there's assholes in any group, but the people who shoot USPSA, we're a bunch of great guys who really like teaching new people. In fact, I enjoy teaching almost as much as I enjoy actually shooting stages. If I show up at a match and you're on my squad and I find out it's your first, second, third, you're getting into shooting USPSA, you're my new pet project, and I'm gonna focus on you almost as much as I'm focusing on the match itself. Because I was you only a year and a half ago, and I understand it can be a little bit much getting into this sport, but really if you just look for some people to ask for help. We'll happily help you not make the same mistakes that we made. Like I said, that accuracy thing, it took me a couple months to just get into shooting faster. And if I can help someone else save the ammo and not make that mistake, especially now when ammo is so expensive, I will help them. But going back to what I was really talking about, your stage plan, ideally you want to shoot from the fewest positions possible, and if you can see a target from multiple positions, as long as it doesn't mess with your reload plan, shoot it from really close, because then you're going to shoot it either faster or more accurately. So it's kind of hard to do this without actually having a stage to show you on, but basically walk through the stage, look where all the targets are, and look where all the places where you can see them from, and then try to find your fastest way through the minimum number of positions and try to figure out where along that you're going to need to reload. Ideally, like I said, if you're in a high capacity division, you're only going to have to reload probably once in a stage. But if you're in a low capacity division like production, carry optics, or God forbid revolver, you're going to really need to plan out your reloads and basically reload every time you're going to be moving your feet. Be mindful of whenever you're planning your reloads, be mindful of the 180. Like I said, try to reload into your handedness or when you're walking straight down range. One more thing to go over is try to draw on the move if you can. There are some stages where you'll start right here and then you have to go left, but you'll also have to go right. But you can also see some targets right off the bat. A lot of people will have the tendency to just try and shoot those targets as soon as you can see them right from the draw. But realistically, if you do that, then all the time that it takes you to draw is going to be fully wasted. So ideally, rather than doing that, you can just run on the draw, shoot the targets that you can see from over here, then come back in, shoot the targets that are here, and then go to the right and shoot the targets from over there. So that's a sort of 30,000 foot view of basic important tips that I think are really important for you to know before you go to your first match. Now we're going to walk you through a course of fire. There are some basic range commands that you need to be familiar with because they're going to be how your range officer is going to communicate with you through the course of fire. The first is make ready. Once the stage is ready for you to shoot it and they have cleared it and there's no one down range, they're going to say make ready. What that means is you're going to take your gun, get it out of the holster, load it up as long as the stage allows you to be loaded at the beginning, which the majority of stages will. Get it loaded, put it back in the holster, or some stages will have the gun start on a table. In that case, you'll put it on the table and you'll assume whatever the ready position is. Sometimes you'll start with your hands below your belt, sometimes hands above your wrists, sometimes hands above the wrists facing up range, all kinds of different positions. Sometimes you'll be in a chair, you'll sit or stand however the stage is written to have you start. Once your range officer sees that you're in the position, he will say, "Are you ready?" When he says that, if you're not ready, make sure he knows you're not ready, because if you don't say anything or you say yes, he's going to proceed to the next range command, which is stand by. After he says stand by, there's going to be a 1 to 3 second gap, and then there's going to be the beep of the timer. Once the beep goes off, your time has begun and you have to shoot the course of fire however you're going to shoot it. If, God forbid, you do something unsafe, the range command would be stop. He will stop you, he'll unload and show clear you, and then you'll be disqualified for doing something unsafe. But as long as you make it through the range, as long as you make it through the course of fire without doing something unsafe, the next thing you can do, you can initiate it on your own, is if you're finished, unload and show clear, in which case you will take your gun, get the magazine out, unload it, make sure that the round in the chamber comes out, and show clear. Visually look with your own eyes, make sure that the gun is clear. You can show it to the range officer, but you make sure you don't break the 180 whenever you're showing him. So that's unload and show clear. And the final range command is if clear, hammer down and holster, in which case you'll let the slide go home, decock it by pulling the trigger. You can't just decock it because you have to make sure that if there was something in the chamber, it would go off. This is the most safe we can make the guns. So if finished, unload and show clear. If clear, hammer down and holster. So you'll let the slide go, you'll pull the trigger, and you'll put the gun in the holster. And then also range is clear, and if he's a cool dude, he'll give you your time right away, so you can know exactly how bad you did. So let me run through that with actual live ammunition. Make ready. Are you ready? Stand by. Beep. If you are finished, unload and show clear. If clear, hammer down and holster. Range is clear. Make ready. Are you ready? Stand by. Beep. If you're finished, unload and show clear. If clear, hammer down and holster. Range is clear. So realistically, that's about all I could cram into this video, trying to teach about USPSA before you go to your first match, because no matter how much I do cram into this video, you're going to learn more at your first match than you could learn from this video. Thank you for watching. I really urge you that if you even slightly enjoy shooting, try USPSA, because it is an absolute blast. And if you have any questions, something you think I should have talked about, or something you're wondering, or something I said that kind of confused you, go ahead and leave them down in the comments section. I'll try to respond as quickly as I can. Have a great day. Try USPSA. Thank you for watching.